Hi, my name is Phillip Stevens. I'm the viola professor here at MSU Denver and also a violist in the Colorado Symphony Orchestra. We're here today to help you prepare your auditions for the Colorado All-State Orchestra. The important things that a judge will be listening for in your recording: your sound, your intonation, your articulation, your good rhythm, and your attention to details. All these things are very important in distinguishing one player from another. One of the most important things to consider is getting a good sound. In this case, since you're making a recording, there's two aspects to that. First of all, we need to have a good setup for recording. It's important not to just set up a phone in your bathroom and try to make the recording that way, but instead have really good quality recording equipment, good space to record in. And so it's always helpful to find some people that have good equipment, that have knowledge of how to make a good recording. The other side of the sound is, of course, the sound that we make on our instruments. Everybody wants a good sound for sure, but it's important to make sure that you play in a resonant way and that you try to eliminate any sort of scratchy sounds or unclear articulations, right? We want clarity in our sound. Another thing about auditions that the judges will be listening for is that you have good rhythm. Now that, can encompass many things as well, actually. Not only that you are very steady with your rhythm, that you can count like a metronome, but also that if the music asks for, or if it seems to ask for anyway, speeding up or slowing down, that you do so in a controlled way, that you aren't doing it by accident, you aren't rushing or you aren't dragging the music, but you're actually doing what the music calls for. The other thing about rhythm that's important is to find good tempos that you can play well, but also that is appropriate for the music. The last thing that I wanted to talk about the audition preparation process is that you pay close attention to the details that are on the page. Now, the details are some things that the composer might put on there, such as dynamics, such as expression markings like crescendos, decrescendos, maybe accents, what notes are short, what notes are long. When there's a rest, that you're very precise about when you cut off notes. Things like that. These attention to details can make a big impression. One of the most important things about playing your scales on the tape is that you get a good sound on the instrument, and that involves using your full bows. I would recommend really showing that you can play all the way from the frog to the tip, trying to get the most resonance out of your viola that you possibly can, and letting your intonation really ring with the resonance of your open strings. It's important to have a good fingering. I use the flesh scale system of fingerings. There are other good scale systems out there, so everybody has their own preferences. You can certainly find my fingerings online here if you need some suggestions. One last thing is it's important to pay attention to the details of what's on the Colorado All-State Orchestra page. For instance, the notes are slurred in groups of 6, and it does have a tempo marking of 80 beats per minute. So it's important to get close to that metronome marking and still use your full bows, but definitely use the slurs that are printed in the part. Just like with the scales, it is very important that you get together with your private teacher and have a good sense of some good fingerings and bowings that will do well to bring out the details in the music. If you need some suggestions of bowings and fingerings, you can see online the ones that I recommend and the ones that I use. But certainly there's many choices out there, and you should work with your private teacher, if you have one, to discover the ones that work best for you. The Tchaikovsky excerpt has some challenges with, a lot of times with the spiccato stroke is mostly what happens. There's a couple of different kinds of spiccato in this. We have to spiccato on the C string, we have to spiccato on the A string, and we have something that's called saltando that you see in the part. We also term as ricochet bowing. So those things all together create for some challenges in this excerpt. I think it's important that when you're showing off a spiccato, when you're working on your spiccato, that you find the right part in the bow so that the bow does the work for you and you don't have to control the bow stroke quite as much. Now, for instance, if I'm going to do a spiccato on the repeated notes here at the beginning of the excerpt, those notes are over on the C string, and you can see I need to be closer to the frog at this point to get those notes to speak. Later in the excerpt, for instance, at letter B, near the end of the excerpt, where we're spiccatoing over on the A string, I would play these out a little bit further in the bow so it's not quite so heavy and rough, as opposed to right here where I did on the C string. It's a little too heavy for the A string as opposed to the C string. That being said, also with this ricochet, this saltando bowing that we have in the middle of the excerpt, now you also have to keep in mind that finding the perfect spot on the bow is essential for this. And your tempo determines a lot of where you would play it in the bow. For instance, if I was going a slower tempo and if I was going closer to the 92 that's marked at the beginning, I would need to play the saltando closer to the frog. If I was playing it faster, I would need to play it further out in the bow, because it bounces quicker out here where the bow is lighter, closer to the tip, and it bounces slower here closer to the frog. So as in preparing any excerpt, it's very, very important to pay attention to the details that are on the page. Those include dynamics, crescendos, accents, if there's dots on them to make them short notes, if there's slurs, we want to make them very legato. So there's always a question about rests when playing excerpts. When there's an extended rest, a lot of times you can skip over those extended rests if it's more than 1 or 2 bars. In this case, in the Tchaikovsky, we end up with 2 half rests and a whole measure of rest in there, almost 2 complete bars. I think it's important, since the music goes by pretty quickly, to count out these rests as you do the recording. Cutting that off early makes it sound like that you may have trouble counting or have some bad rhythm. And so we want to make sure that by counting through those rests, we don't give that impression.